All right, guys, we've got ourselves a fireball that we made in the last video. Now it's time to make this thing do something. So whenever we're making something in the game do something, that means we have to have code to make it do that. So I'm going to make myself a new C# script. I'm going to call it Fireball. And now I'm going to point out that we're starting to get kind of a lot of different script files down here, and it's starting to look a little bit cluttered. Yeah, sure, there's only 6 items in my assets folder, but you know what? I can see the writing on the wall. As we go, we're going to have more and more and more script files. We're going to have more and more things. Let's keep this organized. So right now, before I do anything else, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it scripts. And then I'm going to put all my scripts into that folder. Here we go. Okay. Let's look in the scripts folder. And there they are. Okay, so let's open this Fireball script. Here we are. And let's, first of all, push our brackets down so that your teacher doesn't get freaked out. Okay, so the very first thing that we are going to need to do with the Fireball is it has to travel forward. Okay, we're going to do that exactly the same way that we did with the character. When you press the W key, then the character moves forward, and we used transform.translate to do that. So we're going to use transform.translate to move our Fireball forward as well. The difference is that when we did that with the character, we hid that inside an if statement, and it had to, the if statement qualified whether or not we were pressing the appropriate key before it let the thing actually operate and move us forward. In this case, we want the Fireball to move forward all the time, no matter what. So we're just going to put it in the update function, and we're not going to put it inside an if statement or anything. So just right out here in the open, transform.translate, and we're going to put our vector3 number in there. So we're going to have 0 movement in the x-axis side to side, 0 movement in the y-axis up and down, and then we are going to, in the z-axis, that's where we're going to move. If you remember, if we go over here and look at our player number 1, the player speed we had was 0.1. So I think we want our Fireball to move, I don't know, 2 or 3 times that fast. It feels like it shouldn't be blindingly fast. You should be able to dodge it if you're far away and you can see it coming. That feels like the appropriate kind of video game thing. But I don't think you should be able to outrun it. Just straight run away from it and then move out of the way. So let's make it like 0.3 F for floating point number. 0.3 F is a I don't know. We'll see how that works. Let's save and go back to Unity. And now I need to make my Fireball script be a component of my Fireball game object. So just grab the Fireball and drop it into the inspector there. So now when we hit play here, the script should make the Fireball travel. Yes, success. Okay, good. Excellent. Wonderful. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is make the Fireball not just exist at the beginning of the game. It should only exist when we have a character shoot a Fireball. So we don't want it to exist, and then we do want it to exist, and maybe we want to shoot 5 or 10 Fireballs all at the same time. How we're going to do that is we're going to make a prefab. So first, I'm going to show you how to do it, and then I'm going to explain what it is. So we're going to take the Fireball game object from the hierarchy menu. I'm just going to grab it, and I'm going to drag it down here into, you know what, I don't want it in my scripts folder. Let's go back to the assets folder. I want to drag it into the project tab and drop it there. And now I have a prefab called Fireball. So what this is it has created a file on my hard drive that knows what this Fireball is. it has all these components attached to it. It knows about the fireball script. It knows about the particle system. All that stuff is built into to this. So at this point, we can go to our fireball here, and I'm going to delete it from the scene. We don't want it there. Now we have this fireball that we can use. This is a prefab. So from this file, we can add it back into the scene. This is our pre-made thing. So let's go into our scripts tab. And I don't want to use, for shooting a fireball, I don't want to use either the motion script or the player stats script. I want to have a different script. I'd like everything to be in its own script with its own name, so that whenever we want to access the way that our character handles anything, there's a separate piece of code that we can go to for that. We don't want 70,000 lines of code for everything that the character can do all in one file. We don't want to have to hunt for things like that. So it actually is a lot better for helping to keep you organized if you just create a new script and put the new functionality in that. Some things like we had player stats. A lot of the stats are, I mean, it makes sense to have them all kind of in the same place. We're manipulating the mana, we're manipulating the health. We're accessing the health and mana bar that we've created. So that's that makes sense to have all that in the same script. But firing our projectile at the enemy, I think, is probably worth having in its own script. So let's create another new C# script, and I'm going to call this one shoot. SHOOT. And let's straight off, before anything else, I'm going to add that to my player one. So shoot is going to be a component over there. Now, let's get over here into Visual Studio and fix our brackets. Brackets. Okay. Now, in order to be able to shoot a fireball, our script has to know what the fireball is and be able to get to it. So, we don't have a fireball anymore. The game object is gone. But as far as our code is concerned, a prefab counts as a game object, even though it doesn't exist yet. So we're going to declare a variable, and it's going to be a public game object variable called, I guess we can call it fireball. Okay. Maybe we spell that right. So I'm just going to save that. Let's pop over to Unity. And if we go to our player one and our assets tab, okay, so player one, we have our fireball variable that, and we can just take the fireball prefab and drop it in there, and it's going to know where to find the blueprint for what the fireball is. Okay. So there isn't an actual fireball yet, but we have a reference to what that is. Okay. So now we need an if statement to get our to create this thing. If we want to shoot, I believe we use the number 1 key over here for player 1 to put the shields up. So we're going to use the number 2 key to shoot the fireball, because those are pretty much the 2 actions that we're going to have. So an if statement, if space, parentheses, space, a bracket, enter, and there we go. So input dot get key down, right? We don't want to shoot 60 fireballs per second just because we held the key down. At least I don't think so. And then we're going to use key code dot, oops, alpha 2. So that's the 2 key on the alphabetical side of the keyboard. Now, what we need to do is get that fireball prefab and create a new game object. So the word that Unity uses for creating a new game object from script like this is to instantiate. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to throw down the command instantiate. And then we are going to put some parentheses and a semicolon on the end. Okay, so what we are going to instantiate is the game object that is stored in our fireball variable. So we're going to put fireball. There we go. And then we need to tell it where it's supposed to be. Okay, well, where is it supposed to be? The easiest way to tell it where it's supposed to be is to tell it to, this shoot script is going to be attached to our player. So the fireball is going to start where our player is. So we're just going to say, put it at the player's own transform position. So we're going to say transform dot position. There you go. Now the other thing is, we need it to be pointed in the exact same direction as the as our player, right? So we don't want to be looking directly at our opponent and create this fireball and have it fly off to the left, not even where we're pointing. So we need to, when we create this thing, we need to not only put it where we are, but we also need to point it where we're pointed. So that has to do with the rotation. It has to rotate left or right to be pointed in the same direction as us. So we're, in the same way that we referenced the player's transform.position, we're going to reference the player's transform.rotation. And that is it. That is the entire instantiate part. So let's save and go back to Unity and see if it works. We've only put the shoot script so far onto player 1. So hopefully we'll only get one fireball. Okay, so player 1, here I am turning back and forth. And if I press 1, my shields go up. You can see that. And if I press 2, boom. Yeah. Okay, that's not bad. Fireball, fireball, fireball. Oh, that's interesting. We got some weird stuff happening. It's pushing on me. The fireballs. Okay. Because the fireball is now a game object, it has a, let's see, here we can see all the fireballs that we've shot. They all still exist. If I click on one, I can see what's going on with it. Notice that the fireball has a collider, right? Collider is what the wall had, so that when we went to player 1 and we looked at the player's, we added this rigid body, right? The rigid body component controls the physics, so that when we run into the wall that has a collider, then our rigid body on the player will prevent the player from being able to go into the wall, because the wall has a collider that our player's rigid body recognizes as like, you can't go in there, right? It stops it. The fireball also has a collider. So a lot of the times what's happening is that when I shoot a fireball, it touches me for a second and it pushes me out of the way. The fireball doesn't have a rigid body, so physics doesn't move the fireball. The Unity physics engine pushes me out of the way of the fireball, the player. That's no good. Okay, so we have to fix that. And we also have to fix the fact that we appear to have 15 fireballs that still like are heading to the horizon out there, never to stop. Like, I don't know, this appears to have gone something like 1,500 meters so far. And, well, if we end up like shooting 1,000 fireballs, we don't want 1,000 of these game objects in the scene with Unity having to track where they are. That's going to slow our game down. It's going to make processing hard for the computer. So, so a couple things. First of all, we need to go to our fireball prefab. Notice when we select it down here, we can look at the inspector as if it was a regular game object. So that's pretty cool. Now it has this collider. It has a sphere collider. And here's the part that we want. This is the part that it says is trigger. We're going to check that. Now what that is doing is it's making the, it makes the collider not able to collide with something anymore. Instead, you can still trigger a response, but you have to do it in code. Physics is not going to automatically recognize that an item, a game object with a trigger on it, is something that you can hit, right? So you can't hit the fireball anymore. Let's just test that because I made this fireball prefab. The collider is a trigger now instead of a regular collider. Let's see if it still pushes us out of the way like it did a minute ago. So game is coming up. And so player number 1, you can still see player number 1. So I'm going to shoot fireballs. And notice the fireballs are not pushing me out of the way like they were. I can still shoot a billion of them. That's not good. Notice okay, so we need to make it so that they disappear after they travel for a while. We also should make it so that they deplete our mana bar some. First, let's do the easy thing. So let's go to our fireball script. And what we want to do is we want to have a way for this thing to die after a bit. So the way that occurs to me to do this is to put a counter in here and have it count down. And when it hits 0, then the fireball will cease to exist. So the easiest way to run a counter is that we'll create an integer number, int, call it death counter. I called it death counter because maybe there's already some kind of a command in the computer here in Unity's commands and stuff already called counter. I don't know if there is or not, but I figure there's probably nothing called death counter. So that's helping me to not create something that already exists. Okay, now here's something you haven't seen yet. You can actually, instead of just declaring your variable here in the class and then waiting until the start function to write a second line of code where you assign a value to that variable, you can do both in a single line of code. So I'm going to, this is called initializing your variable. So I'm declaring it to create it, and then I'm also assigning the value all in one go. Okay, so I'm going to give this, we're going to count down one number per frame. So if we go 60 frames per second, then let's see, I don't know, how long should these things last? Let's say, let's give it 600 on the counter, and that will make it last for 10 seconds. I feel like 10 seconds is going to allow the fireball to go way past us. If you're in one corner of the little world and you manage to take a sniper shot all the way across to the other corner of the world where your enemy is, the fireball is probably not going to, it's going to take less than 10 seconds to get there. We need it to stop existing eventually, just not, we don't have to like be super careful about the actual number. So I'm just going to give it 600. And if we're running at 60 frames per second, that means 10 seconds to go 600 frames. Now, down here in update, let's put a, let's assign a new value to death counter. So death counter equals death counter minus 1. Okay, there's our counter. Now we'll check if, parentheses, brackets, if death counter equals 0, then, I can't say equals, right? We're comparing. When we over here in the player stats, we could go to strength, stamina, mana.z and compare with a greater than less than sign, right? But we can't do that with the equal sign over here and death counter equals 0, because the equal sign means is going to become now, right? Death counter is becoming a new number that is death counter -1. We're not assigning a value in here, so equals doesn't work like that. So to make this work, we have to double it up. It looks the same way as like when we were going to put and in here, we had to put 2 ands. That means something different to the computer than if you put a single one. So here we're going to say equals as a comparator because we want to compare. Does the number stored in death counter equal 0? So if we put 2 equal signs, then that allows us to actually compare the two instead of assigning this value of 0 into there. Okay. So if death counter equals 0, then we are going to capital D, destroy something. What are we going to destroy? We're going to destroy the game object that this script is attached to. And that's the fireball, right? It's the fireball script that's attached to the fireball game object. So let's save that. Go back to Unity. Here we are. Hit play. Okay, so I'll just point off a little to the side there, shoot a couple of fireballs, and in 10 seconds, we should see these things start to disappear. And there they go. Okay, so they're destroying themselves, and that's exactly what we want our fireballs to do after they've traveled past anything that we need them to hit. Okay, so got ourselves a counter. Let's see. We need to make this thing, we need to make the fireballs deplete mana. Okay, so I think it's not the fireball itself that's going to do that. Let's go to the shoot script and have that when we instantiate a fireball, that will deplete mana. I think that's the way to do that. I skipped one thing that, now I'll come back to it. Okay. So the trick here is that we need to be able to get to a variable that isn't in the same code with what we have here. So that's kind of awkward, right? So here's what we're going to do in order to do this. We are going to create a new variable to hold our other code. Now, we've done this a bunch of times actually already, because game object right here doesn't actually refer to these things. I mean, it does, but what those things actually are code scripts, right? They're different instances of the same game object code script over and over and over. So when we created a slider, there's a script called slider that we are getting to. A vector3, yeah, that's a script. Notice it's blue instead of this green color. It's a different thing than just a type of a variable. There's a script that has all kinds of stuff to do with vector3s. So now we have a script not only for our shoot, we have a script for player stats. So since our game knows about that, we can create a variable of type player stats. So we're going to make a public player stats. Look, it knows about it already. A public player stats variable called, I don't know, we'll just call it, we'll call it lowercase p player stats. I'm going to call it player stats script. Okay, I like that. So our actual script is called player stats, so that's what the type of variable has to be, and we have to have a name for it. So I've called the name player stats script so that later on down here we know what we're talking about. So what we're going to do is we're going to go when we shoot our fireball, we're going to instantiate the fireball, and simultaneously, or in the next step rather, we are going to go to the player stats script, and we're going to find player stats script dot strength stamina mana. Okay, that's not working. Why is it not working? Player stats has a vector 3 called strength stamina mana, and we would like to be able to get to it, but we can't. I tried typing it in over here, over in my shoot, and my code, the game knows about the player stats script, but it doesn't know about the strength stamina mana variable. So why is that? Well, it's because over here, we haven't made this vector 3 strength stamina mana variable public. It can't be seen outside of the player stats class because it's a private variable. So we have to get in here and make this a public variable. Public and save. Now what that means is that not only are we going to be able to get to it from our shoot script, but we're also going to be able to see over here that variable now. Notice it says strength stamina mana X, Y, Z. It has spaces for all those things. So when we hit play, we'll actually be able to see the numbers over there. So that's kind of cool, but that's not why we're after it. Now we've made this public. We've saved it. We see that the Unity knows about it. Now we're accessing the player stats script that's saved in player stats script variable. Now if I go strength, oh, now it knows about it. It can see it because that variable is now public. So strength stamina mana. What we need to do is the same thing that we were doing when we were manipulating our mana amount over in the player stats script. We're going to assign a new value to it using new capital vector 3, right? With some, you know what? I'm not going to write it all out. I'm going to go over here to my player stats script, and I'm going to grab, here, let's do this. Equals new vector 3, blah, 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 blah. Just going to copy that. And right here where it says new vector 3, I'm going to paste. Okay, so we have a new vector 3, and it's going to use strength stamina mana. It doesn't like this anymore. Why doesn't it like this? Because strength stamina mana is not a local variable. We have to be getting it from the player stats script. So even inside the parentheses here, we're going to have to go back to the player stats script. So I'm going to copy that so I don't have to type player stats script dot in front of every one of these, but that's what we have to do. So I'm going to paste it. Now it likes player stats script dot strength stamina mana dot X. That's a real number as far as it's concerned. Strength stamina mana dot Y, it doesn't like. It's stopped underlining it, but we definitely have to put player stats script on the beginning of that. And we have to put player stats script on the beginning of the Z as well. Now, how much mana should it cost to shoot a fireball? That's up in the air. Maybe we should make a variable for that so that we can fine tune it from Unity without having to come back in here and and mess with the number that's in code. You know what? I'm just going to put 5 in here. So if we have 100 mana, then that allows us to shoot 20 fireballs before we run out of mana. So I don't know. That's a respectable number. So let's have that save. Now the other thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that when we instantiate a fireball, we actually have enough mana to do that, right? If we're at 0 mana, we shouldn't be able to shoot one last fireball, go into negatives or anything like that. So we need to do what we did in player stats when we were putting the shield up. We need to check in the if statement if we are going to have enough mana. So oops. let's see. Now we have to say we're checking on player script dot strength stamina mana dot z. It has to be greater than, greater than 5, because that's how much we're going to spend on a fireball over here. That's how much it's going to deplete from us. So that should work. By token of the fact that we have over in player stats, we went and made that strength stamina mana variable a public variable. That means that we can find it over here in shoot. Now, because it's public, remember, we let's see. The shoot script still doesn't have a reference to the appropriate player stats script. So what we can do there is the same thing that we did with the fireball. We'll just grab player number 1 and drag it into there so it knows it's looking for the player stats script from its own player. So it's the player stats script on player number 1 for the shoot script on player number 1. That makes sense. So we've populated now the variable over here in Unity by dragging the player in so it knows to grab the player stats script from that player. And then in the shoot script, every time we refer to that, we have to not just say strength stamina mana, we have to tell it that we're talking about strength stamina mana from the script that we're holding in that variable. So that should work. I don't think I've forgotten anything. Did we save? We did not. Let's save it. And now let's hit play. So player number 1 turns to the side, fires some fireballs, and look, it's depleting my mana. Yeah! A million fireballs, and after 10 seconds, which seems like an eternity here while I'm recording, they start to disappear. Okay, so we're in pretty good shape. Okay, I think that is plenty enough for this video. That seemed like a really long video. So we've got fireballs that actually deplete our mana. They fly out into space and disappear. We're in pretty good shape. Good job, guys.